I moved into Oak Ridge Hollow in the spring, a cookie-cutter neighborhood tucked behind a gate and drenched in rules. Everything looked like a real estate brochure: beige houses, trimmed hedges, and driveways with cars you could swear were staged. My place was no different, except for the front door. See, that door, it meant something to me. It wasn't just red, it was cherry apple red, a color I picked out with my late wife, Rachel, before she passed. She always said it made the house feel alive, like it had a heartbeat. When I bought this place, alone now, I didn't care that every other door on the street was some shade of submissive gray. That red door was staying, and that's where the trouble began. 3 days after moving in, I got the letter. Subject: violation of HOA architectural guidelines, unapproved paint color. Your property at 214 Sycamore Lane is in violation of Article 4, Section 3B of the Oak Ridge Hollow HOA Code, which clearly outlines the mandatory palette for exterior fixtures. You are hereby ordered to repaint your door to an approved color within 10 days to avoid escalating penalties. No warning, no knock on the door, just a typed threat on HOA letterhead signed by Deborah Langford, the president of the HOA. Now let me paint you a picture of Deborah. Perfect bob haircut, glasses with a gold chain, and a voice like sweet tea with vinegar. She lived 4 houses down, and you could always tell which house was hers by the triple no soliciting signs and the tiny American flag on her mailbox that she adjusted daily. At first I thought this was just a misunderstanding. I went to the next HOA meeting, which was being held in the community rec center. Carpet that smells like mildew and folding chairs too small for adults. I raised my hand, introduced myself, and politely explained the sentimental value of the red door. Deborah didn't flinch. I'm sorry, Mr. Collins. The architectural committee has final say. The color is not within the pre-approved list. It must be corrected. I asked if I could submit a formal request for an exemption. She smiled like a crocodile. You may, but I should let you know, we've never approved an exception in 11 years. Consistency is what keeps our property values high. I should have left it at that, painted the door, sold the house, and moved on. But something about Deborah's smugness, the way she said our property values like I wasn't part of the hour, flipped a switch in me. So I filed the request, attached a photo of Rachel, standing in front of our first house, smiling next to that same red door. I included the paint code, professional application receipt, and a short essay about what the color meant. The request was denied. Of course. The next day I came home to a fine, $100. Then another the following week, $200, then $500. When I tried to appeal, I found out the hearing would be overseen by the same people who issued the fines in the first place. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with some uptight community board. This was a rigged game. I tried ignoring it. I tried reasoning. Nothing worked. And then they sued me. Yep, actual court documents arrived in the mail. The HOA was taking me to small claims court over repeated willful violations and demanding I pay nearly $3,400 in fines and legal fees. That night, I sat in my living room, lights off, staring at that red door. My fists were clenched, and I felt like the neighborhood had turned against me, all because of a paint color, all because I dared to be different. But that's when I made a decision. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. Not by yelling or cursing or breaking the rules. No, I was going to learn the rules, every last one of them. The next morning, I took a personal day off work and drove straight to the county recorder's office. I requested every document tied to Oak Ridge Hollow's HOA, founding articles, amendments, bylaws, court cases, and yes, the dreaded architectural guidelines book Deborah clung to like the Constitution. It took me 3 weeks, 2 binders, and more coffee than I want to admit. And that's when I found it, buried in a footnote in a revision from 1998. Any architectural restriction not reaffirmed by a majority vote of homeowners every 15 years shall be considered lapsed and unenforceable. Let me say that again, unenforceable. I checked the meeting records. They never held a vote, not once in 26 years. They were still using the same guidelines as if they were gospel. And just like that, my door wasn't breaking the rules. Their rules were broken. The fines, the lawsuit, all based on something that technically didn't even exist anymore. But I wasn't done, because once I knew they'd lost the legal ground, I realized I could go further. It was time to fight back. Not just for my door, but for every neighbor too scared to challenge Deborah and her little HOA dictatorship. It was time to take Oak Ridge Hollow back, one red door at a time. So here I was, a man with a cherry apple red door, a stack of fines, and a golden legal loophole the HOA didn't know existed. I wasn't the type to stir the pot, not before all this, but something about discovering that buried clause lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about paint anymore. It was about principle, about people like Deborah thinking they could wield power without oversight. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The first thing I did was file a formal response to the lawsuit, citing the exact provision from the 1998 amendment. I included records from their own meeting minutes proving the necessary affirmation vote had never happened. They thought I was bluffing. Deborah even smirked when she saw me at the next HOA meeting. She stood up in front of everyone with that smug confidence like she was holding all the cards. "We believe Mr. Collins is misinterpreting a technicality," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "Our legal counsel assures us our rules remain in full effect." Too bad for her. I'd already contacted the county. I'd spent days combing through public records and found a copy of the amendment, stamped and certified. The rule was real, binding, and unless Deborah and her board held a vote with at least 51% of homeowners agreeing to re-adopt the architectural restrictions, all fines issued under that section were unenforceable. 2 days later, I filed a countersuit. Yeah, you heard me right. I filed against the HOA for wrongful fines, harassment, and attempted enforcement of invalid restrictions. It was no longer just about getting my money back. I wanted to hit them where it hurt, their credibility. But before our court date came, I did something that really started to rattle their little power structure. I printed 85 copies of the outdated guidelines and the loophole clause, the one about rules expiring after 15 years, and hand-delivered them to every single home in Oak Ridge Hollow. I included a letter, nothing aggressive, just the facts. Dear neighbor, did you know that many of the HOA's rules have technically expired and are no longer enforceable? Did you know you may have been fined for things no longer valid under law? Please read the enclosed documents and feel free to reach out. Jake Collins, 214 Sycamore Lane. It didn't take long for things to get interesting. Within a week, I had a dozen neighbors reach out. People I'd never met before, folks who'd been too afraid to speak up, started sharing their own story. One woman, Maria, had been fined for having a raised garden bed that was 2 inches too tall. Another guy, Greg, got a citation because his mailbox wasn't the correct shade of bronze. They'd all just paid the fines, thinking there was no choice, no recourse. Until now. That month's HOA meeting was standing room only. And the atmosphere? Let's just say it wasn't the usual sleepy affair with cookie trays and polite nodding. This time people were fired up. Deborah tried to call the meeting to order, but she looked shaken, like she'd lost control of the narrative for the first time. I stood up. "I have here," I said, holding up the county-certified copy, "an official document that proves the current architectural restrictions have not been reaffirmed in over 25 years. By your own bylaws, they are no longer enforceable, which means every fine issued under them is invalid, and this board is potentially liable." The room went silent. Someone clapped, then another, and another, until half the room was applauding. Deborah tried to gavel it down, but the tide had turned. She muttered something about consulting legal counsel, but by that point, no one was listening. A week later, I got a letter. This time not from Deborah, but from the HOA's lawyer. They were dropping the lawsuit against me and reimbursing every fine I'd paid. But I wasn't done. I'd spent so much time digging through their operations that I started noticing other cracks in the system, like how board elections were held without proper notice, or how meeting minutes hadn't been officially filed with the county in years, or how they'd rejected new candidates for failing to meet the integrity clause, a rule so vague it might as well say, "We don't like you." So I did what any self-respecting, grudge-holding homeowner would do. I ran for president of the HOA, and this time, I wasn't alone. We formed a small coalition: Maria, Greg, a retired teacher named Linda, and me. We called ourselves the Oak Ridge Renewal Committee. We printed flyers, set up a website, knocked on doors, hosted an DA barbecue at the park, something the HOA hadn't done in years. Our message was simple: transparency, fairness, and actual community. Election day rolled around, and for the first time in a decade, we had real turnout. Almost 70% of homeowners cast ballots. When the votes were counted, it wasn't even close. Deborah lost, by a landslide. And me? I was officially the new president of the Oak Ridge Hollow Homeowners Association, the guy with the red door, the one they tried to silence. But I wasn't here for revenge. Not exactly. I was here to fix what they broke, and maybe paint a few more doors red. Becoming HOA president was never part of the plan. I just wanted to keep my red door, not lead a neighborhood rebellion. But once the votes were counted and I officially stepped into the role, something shifted. For the first time since moving to Oak Ridge Hollow, I didn't feel like an outsider. Neighbors were waving when they walked by. People stopped to chat, not complain. It felt like the place was waking up. Like we all finally realized the HOA didn't have to be some cold bureaucracy run by power-tripping retirees. It could be something better. But cleaning up Deborah's mess? That was a whole different beast. First, I requested a full audit of the HOA's finances. I had a bad feeling, and it turned out I was right. Over $14,000 had been spent in the last 2 years on administrative consulting fees. Know who the checks were going to? Deborah's sister-in-law. No official title, no public record of her being hired, and no services anyone could confirm, just checks. We brought it up at the first official board meeting under my leadership. Deborah wasn't there. She'd resigned quietly and moved to a golf community across town. I'm guessing she didn't want to stick around and watch the system she built get dismantled. I made a motion to suspend all essential spending until we could account for every dollar. Passed unanimously. Next came the fines. We retroactively canceled every outstanding fine based on expired guidelines, and even reimbursed residents who could provide proof of payment. Some folks got back over $1,000. One woman actually cried when she opened her refund check. She said it was the first time the HOA had done anything that felt remotely human, but the real change came when we tackled the rules themselves. See, the problem with HOAs isn't rules existing, it's how they're enforced, and who decides what's acceptable. So we did what no board in Oak Ridge Hollow had ever done. We brought every major policy to a community vote. Want solar panels? You got it. Want to grow native plants in your front yard? Plant away. Want to paint your door red, blue, forest green, or desert sunrise tan? Go nuts. Just make it look like you care. That was our new motto. Well kept, not cookie cutter. Some residents were nervous about it at first. Change scares people, especially in neighborhoods built on sameness. But after a few months, something incredible started happening. The whole neighborhood began to feel lighter. Driveways had personality. Kids painted murals on the sidewalk. One guy installed a tiny library in his front yard, and instead of fining him, we gave him a $50 gift card as a community enrichment bonus. That became a real thing. We wrote it into the budget. And the best part, property values actually went up. Turns out, people want to live in neighborhoods that feel lived in, not curated like a museum. Realtors started calling Oak Ridge Hollow the hidden gem of the district. We even got featured in a local lifestyle blog as the HOA that did the impossible. But look, this isn't a fairy tale. It wasn't all perfect. There were still a few holdouts, neighbors who missed the old regime, who preferred everything bland and uniform. One guy even tried to file a complaint. It's when someone flew a pride flag during June. We let him speak at the next meeting, gave him the full 3 minutes. Then I stood up and said, Oak Ridge Hollow is for everyone. If that bothers you, maybe it's you who doesn't belong. Applause. Meeting adjourned. I still look at that red door every day. Sometimes I catch myself standing there, coffee in hand, just staring at it. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it reminds me of Rachel, of how something so simple could spark something so much bigger. She used to say, change doesn't have to start loud, just true. I think about that a lot, especially when neighbors come by and say things like, hey Jake, I never thought I'd enjoy an HOA meeting, but now I look forward to them. Or when I see the new families moving in, laughing in the yards, customizing their spaces, building lives that look like them, not just the houses next door. That's the real victory, not the title, not the loophole, but the fact that I turned a fight over a door into a movement. So yeah, the HOA sued me for painting my door red. Now, I'm the guy who runs it, and I made sure no one else will ever be fined for having the courage to be different, all because of one red door.